The average American, do you know how high the carbohydrate consumption is for the average American?
I don't. Too much? I think it's the fat and carbs mixed together.
Yeah, think about this just in context, right? Let's take a step back. 300 grams of carbs, 70 grams of protein, no physical activity, and the rest is fat. The average American is either overweight or obese.
Welcome to the Stronger by Design podcast. Today's guest is none other than Dr. Gabrielle Lyons, a board-certified physician and one of the leading medical voices shaping how we think about muscle, metabolism, and aging. She's the host of the Dr. Gabrielle Lyons Show, where she translates complex clinical science into practical action, and she's the author of Forever Strong. Her latest offer, the Forever Strong Playbook, distills muscle-centric medicine into clear, implementable frameworks designed to help people protect strength, function, and independence as they age, which is right up my alley. Gabrielle doesn't approach health through trends or shortcuts. She approaches it through physiology. And today we're going to unpack what muscle-centric health really means for women, particularly who want to train intelligently and stay capable for decades. Welcome to the show.
Well, this is a role reversal because you were recently on my show, and what a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you.
Yeah, I wish I could fly you in. That'll happen eventually, next year, hopefully. Hopefully sooner rather than later. Such a pleasure to have you here on the show. I'd like to start off just by saying flat out, muscle is not about fitness. I mean, it is about fitness, but it's about agency ultimately. And I think you and I both care a lot about that, longevity and aging with empowerment as well. Women aren't failing because they lack discipline, right? They're failing because they're operating under outdated models of aging and health. You know, the social media space is full of such crazy, conflicting information. I just had to field a question yesterday from someone asking about, do we need to do plyometrics and Tai Chi to start our day in order to optimize our health? And there's just always something I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that was circulating out there. So I'd like to talk a little bit, about the playbook. You've spent years, like I have, talking about muscle-centric. Well, I haven't talked about muscle-centric medicine, but you've spent years talking about muscle-centric medicine, and now you've translated that thinking into the Forever Strong Playbook. Before we get into the details, what problem were you actually trying to solve with it?
I believe that people have the potential to be the strongest, most resilient version of themselves. And in order to do that, they do need a great tactile playbook and just a manual to be able to be and function in a way where their efforts result in outcome. And frankly, the first book was a manifesto, and all of the science and all of this literature that spans over 2 decades of my own research and training. But the playbook is tactical, when rubber meets the road. And it was the book that I originally wanted to write. And in fact, the new dietary guidelines are reflected in this book because my mentor wrote the protein portion of the dietary guidelines. It is not by accident. And this allows people to have agency, like you always say, to know exactly what to do, how to design a diet wherever you are in your, I want to say health span, but really in your muscle span.
Beautiful. Love it. Let's dive right into protein then. And what a serendipity that your mentor.
I was on stage. I was on stage as RFK was addressing the American people. I was one of 15 or so people on stage with a sign that said, "Eat real food," and I was holding a steak. It was probably...
was it raw or was it cooked?
It was just a sign holding a steak. It was so funny. It was probably one of the most surreal moments of my entire life. And I'll frame this up for you. I spent, and you know this, I have spent 25 years being mentored by one of the world leading experts. And not only that, I believe in him as a scientist so much and the work that we have been doing. I've spent so I finished my fellowship 2015. I've spent the last over a decade working on getting this message out to the public because, I trained as a geriatrician. I was at the bedside of individuals that were never going to walk out of the hospital, out of a nursing home. It was devastating. And I made a promise to myself and I made a promise to my fellow human that I was never going to let that happen to anyone again, if I had anything to do with it. And relentless criticism, insults, you name it, humiliation, you name it, but it didn't matter. And to actually be there at the moment and know that I was in part responsible on the back end to provide visibility for some of the world's greatest scientists to be able to have their input was just a moment that it's that pivotal moment, kind of like the sliding door moment. And even better, this science now comes to the forefront for your community and for your listeners. And one of the things I love about you, again, so I have a podcast that is mostly PhDs and MDs, but
we squeezed in there.
And I made Michelle come on because I also choose people that are the best at what they do and really exemplify an alignment. It's not just what they're talking about, but how they're living. And there's very few people that do that better than you and and how you have worked with your mom. It's just truly extraordinary. And the other thing is that science is very important to you. The evidence-based practices, I believe, from my understanding and our friendship, is very important to you. And so to see the fact that we are recognizing the science behind protein, because in the bodybuilding world and the fitness world, we've been talking about it forever, but we've been talking about it through the lens of body composition and physical performance, not through the lens of aging, which is something that you have really shifted in practice with you and your mom in your mid-50s and your mom in her 70s, right? It's her 70s.
She's 80. She's 80, and next month I'm trying to organize her birthday party in Mexico City.
I will be there. It's in Mexico City. I'll be there. I might be there. Okay.
All right.
Anyway, and I mean that. So we're now in these guidelines that we've had for since the 80s. These guidelines have never addressed, and I'm thinking about how to say this, have never addressed the importance of dietary protein. It has always been a focus on the minimum to prevent deficiencies. The dietary guidelines in the past have really been, okay, so it's 0.8 grams per kg, which is the RDA, simply focused on the minimum to prevent deficiencies. These new dietary guidelines, they reevaluate the guidelines every 5 years. These new dietary guidelines, for the first time in history, have addressed the importance of protein for optimal aging. And that number is 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kg.
It's a big change. Yeah. It's a really big change. Yeah.
Because I want to know if you have questions, and then I want to highlight areas of confusion so that we can separate fact from fiction.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. So let's just call it out. There's a real tension right now between performance-based protein recommendations and long-term health recommendations. I've had several guests on the show, and I, of course, am in the trenches as both a performance coach as well as a lifestyle and transformation coach. And my moniker is like, we don't dumb things down for the civilian female. If it's working at the highest level, you have access to the same knowledge. We're not gatekeeping anything for athletes. And I hear such interesting divides between people that are very, very educated, very researched. And for me, it comes down to the differences between recommendations for performance-based protein limits versus the general health and long-term health recommendations. But what I'm hearing from you is, well, we still want to see that limit for the average person that just wants to age well. We're seeing that pushing up. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And now I want to clarify this. The RDA didn't change. The recommended dietary allowance has not changed. The minimum will remain the minimum. What has changed in the guidelines, and that's a point of confusion for people, what has actually changed is that now the recommendation is highlighting something for optimal health. And the guidelines, most people don't understand, the guidelines are exactly that. It's just a guideline. The guidelines offer a range. And when we understand that it's not an absolute number, people are saying, oh, well, the guidelines are saying this. No, the whole point of the guidelines is to allow for flexibility. And if we think about what people are eating, the average person is eating 1.1 grams per kg, which means 50% are above that number, but 50% are below that number. And when we think about those numbers, if you take a woman and the average protein intake for a female is 70 grams. And if
crazy.
70
of any size, right? Of any size. Because I always think about, as a physique coach, I think about the size of the person, not just in their muscle mass, not just, it's a woman, not just their gender.
Absolutely. If the average intake is 70 grams and 50% and for a 70 gram, for a 150 pound woman, if you take that, that means 50% of that population is below 55 grams of protein a day.
Which is just wild.
Yes. And the average intake for a male is 90 grams. And again, we have to think about why protein is so important and how we have been framing it up. Now, there is no, and you brought up something that is important, and probably the biggest source of contention is people will say, well, I don't want to eat that much protein. It doesn't matter if I'm eating that much protein because I'm not training. And there is this idea that the protein for longevity, there's this common discussion that we should restrict protein for longevity. And what I would say is really two things. How does someone want to age? And let's say, for example, protein affected longevity, which I personally do not believe it does, but let's say someone were to believe that, and that might be a belief, and that is part of their functioning hypothesis. If that in fact was true, there are two questions that person would have to ask. Number one, if in fact it affects longevity, how much longer are you going to live? Are you going to live 5 years longer with protein restriction, decrepit and in a nursing home? Or are you going to live 5 years less with your mental functions and full physical capacity? Now, I think that I know that answer for most people. But again, how do we actually frame it into what is reality? And then the other question someone would have to ask is, the idea that we would restrict dietary protein would mean, for longevity, would mean a whole host of things, meaning that we don't recognize the importance of both muscle and dietary protein.
Bingo. And body composition, right? So again, as a physique coach, you just know what works really well and what works on a tight timeline. And yet you see some things circulating and people arguing back and forth. And from my area of expertise, my husband's area of expertise, we just kind of shake our heads and it's like people are fighting over the wrong things, right? And we'll dive into that a little bit later about carbohydrate and context again. So let's just finish off with the protein, right? Do you, in your opinion, with performance and hypertrophy contexts, which still applies to, and this is how I coach, right? It still applies to the average Jane, because building muscle ain't easy, as you and I both know. It's not easy. And so when we think of like sufficiency, protein sufficiency to building muscle, higher protein loads can be very, very useful. And when we compare with lifestyle context and longevity context, we have that base. Now we're adding this layer of optimization, even for lifestyle and longevity goals. Do you tease out for this class the importance of protein distribution,
Yes.
any per meal thresholds, or sustainability over decades? Go, hit us.
Is it mostly audio or visual? Both. Do people look both audio and visual? Do they watch and do they listen?
Mostly listening, but I don't want to miss the visual.
Now I gotta also thank God because my top and my bottom don't match, friends. This playbook is the book that I wish that I wrote. And I know that you have a digital copy, but once you get the hard copy, you will be so thrilled. I'm really proud of it. And here's why. This book was designed to be something that you can pick up, and it's visually amazing and
Beautiful.
so well
Wow.
organized. Because at the end of the day, look, it talks about distribution, how to do it, but in a way where you can pick it up and read it. It's not burdensome. If a woman is listening to this and they're like, you know what, I care both about aging and I care about performance, there are a few fundamental principles that apply, and they are the following. Number one, total dietary protein intake. And we have seen this. In fact, there was a group, Arnell et al., and it's a French group. They looked at the same cohort of women, and in one group, they did protein pulsing. They did very small protein meals, 10 grams or less, 7 times a day. In the other group, they then did the study again, where one meal was at least 50 grams of protein. Same total amount of protein, the distribution was different. What they found was that those that had the distribution that had one meal that was at least 50 grams of protein, they retained more lean mass. And again, this goes into the context of it is what you eat in totality, but as we age, we have to do everything we can to help support the efficiency and overcome that, quote, aging process of skeletal muscle. So if someone were to take a step back and like, okay, Gabrielle, Dr. G, what are you talking about? This is so cumbersome. I would say, okay, here's how we're going to do it. You are going to focus on total calories. There's the total calorie component. And after that, it's the protein component. And that protein range can be anywhere from 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of target body weight. 0.7 at the low end, which is closer to that 1.6 grams per kg, up to 1 gram per pound of target body weight. Now, how do you do it? The first meal is the most important. I don't care what time you have it, but that first meal after an overnight fast, you should hit between 30 and 50 grams of protein. Why is this? Because your body is now primed for nutrients, and you want to get that first meal right to be set up for metabolic success. 30 to 50 grams. And listen, there's a lot of argument. Oh, protein distribution doesn't matter. And again, this is where the nuance comes in. And this is where people, so I've been working in research and working in a metabolic lab. This is very different than someone who does, say, an education that doesn't include research. And both are incredibly relevant, but there are nuances to study design and also how we interpret the data. So one cohort of, say, influencers or physicians or whoever they are out on social media would say distribution doesn't matter. And I would say, yes, if you're 35 or under, if you're young, distribution totally doesn't matter. If your total protein intake is on the high end, distribution, and maybe you're 60, distribution might not matter. However, if we believe that distribution doesn't matter at all, then why is nearly every single protein study with humans focused on that first meal? That first, and there's a number of reasons, but again, we can't just say distribution doesn't matter because there is evidence that it matters, and there's evidence that it can support healthy aging. And the other aspect of that is we also know that total overall calorie consumption goes down. My mom is in her 70s. She eats like a bird. If we don't begin to focus on distribution, then her body composition is going to change.
Yeah, I see the same thing. Yeah.
So again, and then because we're going to get to carbohydrates, because I did this, I did an hour-long lecture to a bunch of providers, and they pull out one clip about carbohydrate disposal, and it just went viral with tons of criticism. It was so interesting.
I know, I saw that. Yeah.
But what was so fascinating about that is, number one, incredibly foolish of an online community because it's a 60-minute talk. And number two, you're actually wrong in your criticisms. And we're going to talk about, again, the nuance between what is in the paper, for example, the way that we talk about carbohydrates, me and you and most people, much of the literature comes from very controlled studies. That's not real life. We don't do euglycemic clamps. We just have to be a little bit more discerning. So
the context is so important, right? Like, I know about you, but I spend most of my time caveating. Like, well, yes, this is how I start off my day with 60, 70 grams of carbs. And then I consume 20 grams of carbs in the middle of training. And then I immediately consume 70 grams of carbs afterwards. But that isn't going to work. That's not how I got my mother to go from 200 pounds to 130 pounds, right? So context, who's in front of you, what kind of a sink, like how much muscle do they have? Because muscle is a sink for carbohydrates and protein and amino acids. I mean, you understand this, but this is where when you get influencers online kind of offering these sweeping generalizations, it makes people very, very confused. And it's a little bit more complicated, but we do have to refer to context. Who do we have in front of us? What's the goal? What's their current reality? What are the contingencies, right?
And that's exactly for protein.
Yeah.
And how we determine, there isn't just one number for any one person, and it changes as they age. In the book, it talks about how you make a protein decision. Protein decisions are based on age, physical activity, metabolic health, personal choice. And protein actually, it's so fascinating, it's this U-shaped curve. The older you are, the more protein you need.
Particularly after 60, right?
Yeah, well, actually, yes. And I would say something shifts after 35. After 35, something shifts. And it's just a good number because then you're getting ahead of it. The other protein decision, which is, again, counterintuitive, the more sedentary you are, the more protein you need.
Interesting.
The less you move, the more protein you need. Because how do we stimulate that tissue? We stimulate it through training and movement, and we stimulate it through dietary protein. So the balance changes. If you're not moving, your movement is down here, then your protein intake has to be higher. And when we reorient ourselves to, again, what is the outcome we're looking for? It's always like, what is the outcome? The outcome is healthy muscle. How do we get healthy muscle? There's a million different ways to get healthy muscle. There's one way to do it wrong, which is not to do it. And that protein decision, again, is based on age, physical activity, the more elite of an athlete. So for someone like me, I don't need super high protein. I train 4 days a week. I train with weights 4 days a week. But if I was like you and maybe getting ready for a show or training even more intensely, I would probably go to the higher end, which would be closer to 1 gram per pound of target body weight. I'm probably close to that.
I eat more than that.
You eat more than that?
I love protein. I love food in general. I love all the macros.
and you use all of it. Again, and you use all of it. That's how we make protein decisions. And these new food guide recommendations are extraordinary because they bring back the idea of real food, and they bring back the idea of, or they put in place nutrient density. And that is how many vitamins and minerals and the kinds of macronutrients found per calorie. It is, we're at a place where we can actually change. I want to say Americans, but I guess I'll throw in Canadians and where you are, which is in Mexico City, everybody. We can change worldwide health, and it does start with education.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to tease out one thing before we dive into training, because you said people that are sedentary have higher protein needs. But can you put that into context in terms of numbers? So we've got that range, right, of 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of target weight. And guys, if you're listening to this, I talk about this a lot myself. When you're in your fighting shape, right? What weight would that be? What weight would you be, right? So if you were a college athlete, what weight were you when you were a college athlete? So that's your target weight for whatever your size is. So 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of that target weight. Mm-hmm. You've got somebody who's sedentary. They're not exercising. How much? They're a 100-pound female, right? 4'10", 100 pounds. How much protein are you saying she needs to eat? She's 50 years old, 100 pounds. Tiny thing, 4'10".
I love it. Tiny. We're going to go through how I actually wrote out these recommendations. Again, I know you guys can't really see it, but you see how beautiful this book is?
What page is it? What page is that? Gabrielle?
So this is page 56.
Page 56 of the Forever Strong playbook.
Yeah. It's just, I'm so proud of it. It's the protein problem you didn't know you had. Okay. And you determine your protein range, and it actually takes you through the numbers. And here's what it says. Again, we can think about this as a 50-year-old woman. So if you are 35 or older, you aim for higher. So we'll say, let's target 1 gram per pound. If you are sedentary, you aim for higher, again, leading us towards closer to 1 gram. If your activity level is moderate, you have more flexibility within that range. You could go a little bit lower.
So when you say higher, you mean of that range, that optimal range, so 0.7 is like the kind of the base, up to 1, you're saying to aim more for 1. You're not saying go higher than 1, you're saying aim more for 1, right?
Could you go higher than 1? I want to be very clear. You could. Is there any evidence to support that it is dangerous or it's a problem? Absolutely not.
Not unless you have kidney disease, exactly.
There's no reason to not. But again, as a physician, what I really wanted to do is I wanted to place, okay, so where is the evidence? What can I say based on the evidence? And this is what I say. So if you're an elite athlete, though, you aim for higher. You aim for closer to 1. Now, here's where it comes in.
So most people should be closer to 1. Based with the reality, which is, a lot of people are sedentary and they're older and all of that. Most people shoot closer to 1 gram per pound of
and if you are a tiny thing and you're 4'11" and you're 50 years old and you're 110 pounds, I already know that you're going to be on the higher end. If you are at your target body weight, let's say she wants to maintain 110 pounds. Now, here's also a caveat. I'm glad we're talking about this. I don't recommend anyone go below 100 grams. If we were to say, okay, what is the baseline? You don't want to go below 100
Interesting.
grams. Why? And where does this come from? I didn't make this number up, because when you go below 100 grams, and it seems that, so protein, while we talk about protein, it's really these 20 different amino acids, 9 of which are essential. It seems that when you go below 100 grams from a dietary perspective, some of the metabolic effects of protein are not exhibited. For example, dietary protein, when combined with a lower carbohydrate diet, can improve blood glucose regulation. It can decrease triglycerides. It can decrease fasting blood glucose and fasting insulin levels. Part of the thermic effect of food, and I'm sure that you've covered this before, protein, carbohydrates, and fats all have a certain thermic effect of feeding. What does that mean? It means when you eat it, let's say, 10 to 20% of that energy is utilized in the process if it's just protein. Obviously, we eat full meals, but if you are eating, again, this is a oversimplified example, 100 calories of straight dietary protein, 100 calories of straight lean meat protein. You use, and it's 100 calories, you use 20 calories to manage the muscle protein synthesis effect, the digestion. It's all of these metabolic processes cost energy, they cost calories. When you eat it, therefore, your caloric, what your body sees in terms of net calories is 80. And I know that was really complicated, and I'm sorry. But
no,
again,
not at all.
Okay, so why does this matter? Because we have to, if I'm telling you something, I have to give you a reason. If I say, I don't want you to go below 100 grams, I want to at least give you a few reasons why. Because as people are tuning into you, and especially the older, the more mature women, when you go from eating a normal standard American diet or just getting interested in body composition, your mind is typically blown by the amount of protein that we talk about it because you've been indoctrinated from a minimum. 100 grams is the minimum recommendation. Now, that first meal is the most important, but I like to see 2 meals that have at least 30 to 50 grams of protein, because this is how you support muscle. And you want to be able to design a meal where your blood sugar isn't all over the place. And also you want to support muscle. And muscle is supported both by physical activity, but by also that threshold. And that's how I would, and there's no evidence for that middle meal. The first meal and the last meal have the most robust scientific evidence. You could easily do 50 grams of protein at the first meal, 50 grams of protein at the last, and then I don't care what you do in between.
I don't think I can get all my calories in 2 meals.
You wouldn't.
You need to be somebody not eating too much food or have a really big stomach.
But again, how do we make it very practical? What I wanted people to be able to take away from this
Make
playbook
it simple, exactly. Simple rules to live by.
Should we talk about carbohydrates, or you want to talk more protein?
No. Let's skip on. There's 2 more things I want to touch on. So I want to touch on carbohydrate, contextualizing carbohydrate consumptions, and I'd love to talk about type 2 muscle fibers. If we could hit on those 2 things, that would be so great. So yeah, let's dive in. So carbohydrates, insulin resistance, and context, right? Muscle, we know that muscle changes carbohydrate tolerance. And we know that body composition, right? Body fat versus muscle and lean tissue changes carbohydrate tolerance. So how do you think about carbohydrate intake for people with obesity or insulin resistance?
I love this question. And what I appreciate about you is you're allowing me to frame this up for the real person. The average American, do you know how high the carbohydrate consumption is for the average American?
I don't. Too much? I think it's the fat and carbs mixed together, and lack of nutrition in general in the calories.
Totally. Yeah, that's what it is.
As a percentage?
Or just how much?
I think people are 80% carbs. I think they're 60% carbs and 40% fat.
We eat 300 grams of carbs a day.
Really? I can't get that many carbs into my. Who's doing all that eating? This is skewed toward a certain population because my gals struggle to get their carbs in.
300 grams a day.
Interesting.
That is 3 oral glucose tolerance tests a day.
Oh, I guess if people are doing the sugary lattes and
Yep. Yes. So let's see what the average macro intake. So if the average macro intake is 300 grams of carbohydrates a day, and then think about this just in context, right? Let's take a step back. 300 grams of carbs, 70 grams of protein, no physical activity, and the rest is fat. The average American is either overweight or obese, okay? We're just going to have a real conversation.
What are the stats now? It's like 60% of the population?
More like 70. I think the last one I looked at is 73 or 74%.
And there are real negative health implications for that. And especially when we see younger people facing obesity, it just compounds. Yeah.
1/3 of our children are either diabetic or pre-diabetic.
It's a tragedy.
Carbohydrate intake. The average carbohydrate intake is around 300 grams a day. Now, people are thinking, okay, well, that doesn't sound like a lot. And the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance, is 130. Potentially is probably even too high, but it's 130. And then the question becomes, do we need carbohydrates? We don't have a requirement for carbohydrates. We actually can make them all when we're just talking about biological requirements. We don't have a biological requirement for carbohydrates. We can make carbohydrates through gluconeogenesis. Are carbohydrate foods good? Yes, because whole foods with, fruits and vegetables and potato or rice, they're not bad foods. They're good foods. And, we should get a variety of nutrition. However, if 300 grams of carbohydrates are in our day, and typically it's close to 100 grams of carbohydrates a meal, we have to ask, how is this affecting our health? And how are we managing this? And much of the data that we see when we think about something called, and I'm working on a paper with Don Layman to publish this for peer review, is this idea of carbohydrate tolerance. Carbohydrate tolerance, in our perspective, is how many carbs can you have without deranging metabolism. And the reality is, if people are sedentary and eating 300 grams of carbs, you're not in a good place. One would not want to continue to consume carbohydrates throughout the day. You're adding insult to injury, as they say. Now, how do we determine what a carbohydrate tolerance is? If you calculate out the disposal rate, how much goes to muscle glycogen, how much the brain is using, how much muscle used at rest. If you go into the literature and you calculate the organ numbers, all of these numbers, which I encourage people to do, it comes out to be around 40 grams in a 2-hour period. Remember, people are largely not moving.
Context is so important, and I feel it really clears up a lot of the confusion, what people are hearing in the social media space. It seems like every medical expert is on a soapbox, right? And these absolute messages just create confusion and mistrust from the layman. Context is everything.
And then the question then becomes, how do we design a diet that supports muscle health? If you are sedentary and overweight or obese, then what should your carbohydrate intake be? Well, your carbohydrate intake should not be 300 grams. And I made a statement that said, if you are an average American, you should not go above between 40 and 50 grams of carbohydrates per meal, because you will further distort metabolism.
And to be clear, you mean the actual macro, right? So carbs coming from a source. It wouldn't mean like 50 grams of bread. It would mean 50 grams of carbs coming from bread.
Yes,
Am I right to tease that out for people? Because it's confusing, right? You're 50 grams of carbs and people think literally it's 50 grams of apples, but we're talking about the macronutrient. Yeah.
That's a really good distinction. Correct. And the reason is because that glucose, those carbohydrates, they have to go somewhere. And where is it going to go if your muscle is full, which that's the primary site of glucose disposal? Your muscle is full. Your skeletal mass doesn't burn primarily carbohydrates at rest. It primarily burns fat. Unless you force it to burn carbohydrates by continuing to expose it without having exercise. And when you calculate that number, it ends up being around between 40 and 50 grams. Now, if you are totally active and your muscle glycogen is empty and you're moving around like me, you know me, you're at my house, I'm like,
oh my God, guys, she's crazy. She makes me look like a sloth.
But you are also moving around. I probably have no muscle glycogen left. So for me, having a higher carbohydrate diet above 130 isn't a problem. But again, how do we design a diet for someone who is starting, someone who wants weight maintenance? And we typically recommend a 1-to-1 ratio. Now, the reason I don't say just cut carbs completely is because I don't really want to set people up for failure. But what I do want to do is I want to design a diet that they can continue throughout their life, so they're not thinking about it. The first meal of the day should have between 30 and 50 grams of protein. You could absolutely, if you choose, mirror that with carbohydrates. No problem. But anything beyond, and 130, again, is just a range, is just a number. Anything beyond that 30 to 50 per meal has to be earned through exercise. And that number that we get in the literature—
That's a tough statement for some people to hear. They don't like to hear that earned piece. And I understand where they're coming from. You know, we live in such a diet culture, and especially for women, this idea of earning your food and having unhealthy relationships with food in general, right? But I understand what you mean. And to be honest, the way that the system that I teach my coaches is when we have somebody that's in that obesity range, and I really look at the waist circumference too. We got gals that their waists are, that 35 and higher width. We pull back on carbs out of the starting gate. We take their average calories. We make sure they're protein sufficient. And then we play around with the carbs and the fat, but generally we bring the carbs down. We focus a lot on fibrous carbs, right? So whole food choices, which I know you're a champion of. It doesn't mean we demonize, the fun foods, but we really pull back because our goal is to educate the client and get them some great success out of the starting gate. That's what I did with Joan. And when we have those starchier carbs, we put them around their training, pre and post. Because we know that the muscles are more sensitized to pulling glucose in and storing it as glycogen, right? Or even being used to fuel the workout. And that it's not complicated and it works. And then we see how much we try to keep the carbs as high as we can for as long as we can. And when things plateau, we start titrating it down. But what the carrot is listen, guys, this isn't a forever thing. And I wanted to tease that out in this conversation because it's also not a forever thing. Once you optimize your body and get that muscle growing and get the body fat down, we see this wonderful change that starts to happen where your tolerance for carbs starts to go up. Now, you want to play the games very carefully, listen to the data, and be smart. But the future is you will be able to tolerate a lot of yummy carbs if you succeed in changing your body composition.
And I'm going to even say one more thing, which I think you'll appreciate, that we haven't really talked about, because I know we're going to talk about composition of muscle. We see a change in body composition, and we see a change with aging if you don't have the same stimulus for muscle fibers. Basically, Michelle, nobody does muscle fibers better. Look at this woman. I mean, you're like, I don't even know how you did that. But
oh, stop.
So
I've seen you. I've seen your shoulder cap. Please.
I have like a pancake butt. I don't know what happened, but it was always that. So when we age, we're all born with mixed muscle fibers, and typically there's probably a baseline genetic component, and then it's influenced by training. Okay, whether it's aerobic type training, whether it's resistance training, that really helps with these type 2 muscle fibers. And, there's hybrid fiber types. There's type 1, which we associate with more endurance and long, lean type muscles. And then there's the type 2 muscle fibers, which we associate with bigger, bulkier, more jacked fibers. There seems to be this transition from type 2, for those that have type 2, to closer to type 1. Like, I look at my dad, who was an athlete, a wrestler, and I've watched him. I mean, listen, he's very fit now. He listens to all my interviews, so he's going to be listening to these. So I better not say anything bad, but Dad, I love you. You do need to hit the gym a little bit harder. I know you do push-ups.
He needs to go train with my mom.
He does.
I'm always telling her to pull back. I'm like, Mom, please, can we pull back a little bit? Leave a couple of reps in the tank.
I need to get the date, and I'll come for the birthday. So there is this natural transition, which is why I got in a lot of trouble when I said walking wasn't enough. Walking maintains those type 1 fibers, but I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about maintaining the muscle mass that you have. And you have to really maintain that. And the way that you do that is you must do resistance training. This is one way you can maintain both your body composition, but also the quality of muscle. And again, this is a very long-winded way of saying the simple act of doing physical activity helps you have healthier muscle because you're using those substrates. There's a bit of a flux. You're emptying the tank. You're using muscle glycogen, and that becomes really important.
Why are type 2 muscle fibers so critical for aging, and how should women train them differently over time, or should they?
Yeah, I mean, again, type 2 muscle fibers, and there's a bit of a nuance because I used to do muscle biopsies, which is necessary for the removal of tissue. Not fun. My armpits would be sweating every time. Type 2 muscle fibers, the way in which you maintain and get them is by doing resistance training, by focusing on being strong, by focusing on hypertrophy. They will not just stay by themselves, that the body is very responsive. And that's the best. And I put together a protocol in this book, which I'd actually, frankly, I'm going to throw this out there. We are bringing this challenge to life February 15th. Okay, February 15th, we are bringing the Forever Playbook to life. For those people that get the book and enroll, we are going to do a challenge, a 6-week challenge. I'm just going to throw that out there. I would love for you to be the person that we talk to about the training component.
Love it. Yeah, let's do it. I'd be more than happy to
it would just be fun.
Participate.
And what this has in it, it's a 6-week, again, I'm sure that your community is already doing their own program, but this has a 3-day-a-week resistance training. It has high-intensity interval training in here. It has VILPA, which is vigorous intermittent physical activity. And again, it is a playbook, and the way to maintain these fiber types are, I will show you. And by the way, I want to tell you something that you taught me that I'd never had an opportunity to tell you about when you were on my podcast. But this also has, look, visuals on. And again, this is a 3-day-a-week resistance training, but that's enough to be able to maintain those tissues. Now, I just want to touch on quality of muscle. You become healthier by the simple act of being active. Whether you change body composition or not, you change the quality of muscle. You decrease intermuscular adipose tissue. And that's critically important. Something that is also very liberating in the way that even if someone isn't successful at losing body fat, let's just say, I had this one friend in fellowship. She was a fellow, and man, she trained so hard. She was actually in the Navy. She trained so hard, but her body composition didn't change. I mean, she just seemed as if she, maybe there was some other things going on. But I used to believe that you couldn't be healthy if you had a high body fat percentage. I really believe that, and I was wrong. There is evidence to support that when someone is still really physically active, that they can still be healthy. Regardless of someone's size, when you move that skeletal muscle, you improve the quality of those fiber types, you improve the composition of muscle, you improve your brain function, and you become stronger.
I'm so glad you get this, because it's not about one size fits all and that health looks a certain way. We can definitely say, we can generalize and say, well, it does seem that, having a certain amount of muscle and body fat seems to lend itself to fitness, right? But that's not the same as saying fitness only looks one way. And we need to acknowledge that, because there are people that are incredibly fit and they have a bigger body. They're able to be fit at a higher threshold for body fat. But the key is the key is always going to be that they have that sink of muscle mass, and they're training themselves to move well, right? There's that one guy that's an incredible ballet. You've seen him perform, and he's just doing things that I could never do. He's pirouetting and doing glissés and jumping into the splits. And I've seen other gals, especially in the CrossFit world, where they are just absolute beasts of athletes, and they have a higher body fat, but they have muscle and they're training their movement patterns. These guys are real athletes.
And I want to highlight something that you taught me, actually, that that it made me have a lot of introspection. When you were on my podcast, we talked about what are the moves everyone should do. And in my mind, I was like, push up. And you're like, Gabrielle, and you're very nice and respectful. Again, I'm not a professional trainer. This is just in my mind. I'm thinking, well, everyone should be able to do a push-up and push up off the floor. And you were like, well, you know what? You don't have to start there. You can start against the wall. And it was a push against the wall. Do you remember that? It was a chest push. And I had never thought about this, because we talk about one size fits all, and it's not really one size fits all. And then we think about what is the way in which we can recommend things that everybody does. And
beautiful. Well said. Thank you.
Yeah. Are you kidding? It was awesome. I use it all the time. I talk about you. But anyway, one of the components of training, and this is, I think, something really important, is that our muscle strength can outpace our tendons. And when we're young, we can be extremely reckless and do whatever, and maybe our recovery doesn't matter. But as we age, we do have to prioritize nutrition. We have to get that piece right. In addition to the nutritional aspect, we have to manage risk from an injury perspective. As you talk about these fiber types and you talk about strength, we think about power, force, balance. This becomes really critical. And having a well-designed program is probably the number one prevention in terms of injury.
And I think, and I always want to empower people, right? Learn to coach yourself. We're so blessed that we have tech these days. We have these beautiful cameras in our phones, and it's relatively simple to videotape some of your basic movement patterns and then assess, is my foundation with this movement safe enough to load and push to failure? Or do I need to regress the lift? And so maybe instead of walking lunges, maybe I need to do like staggered leg press. So you're locked in, you're secure. There's less variables at play, and you can really load that, right? So that's important as well. But you don't have to, rely on somebody else. You can really take that into your own hands. There's such great things on YouTube now where you can look at it and reference it. So, and I'm saying this because I don't want there to be a barrier for people around cost, right? We can all win here. And then, of course, if you can't afford to work with an expert and all of that, then go for it.
Yeah. It's a really good point. And, as we sit here and we chat and we talk about protein and we talk about muscle and longevity, what we're really talking about is bringing people a better version of themselves. And the entry point is physical, but the outcome is universal.
I love that. And we're democratizing longevity, actually. So it's not this elitist thing that we have to do a million things to have longevity. In fact, some of the best, not the best, but some of the most well-known centurions, they don't do very complicated, right? They don't do very complicated processes, but they major in the right things, which is I think they are actually all doing whole foods nutrition. And they're staying very, very active, and they're contributing, right? They're staying relevant, they're contributing, they have really strong social relationships.
It makes me think about this idea of community. You don't need a ton of people, but you do need the committed. You don't need dead weight, no pun intended, but you need a handful of people that are also committed to your success. And, this playbook, the first section is actually how to think. The first section is how do we unify our mind to be able to close the gap from being interested and informed to taking action. And
it's the biggest gap to bridge.
I mean, when we understand that we leverage our brain and we expect and we prepare for our own human weaknesses, and that we recognize that there's a whole host of predictable patterns in how we think, then we can address it. And we really anchor in on that why. For example, Joan and you have a very strong why is to do what you do. Then you can execute, and then you can be very discerning. Of course, how to eat, how to move, how to recover, all of that stuff is in there. But this is, this is a manual for a better version.
I love that you start with mindset, and I love the accent on community. And I think people that are, heading into the new year and want to get healthy, this is a safe place for them to get started. It's a great book. It's full of information, and then there's going to be, I think, some guidance into doing this playbook, and you're part of a community, right?
All of it. We're gonna love it. I'm dragging you in on it. I'm getting you ready for the third book. I'm dragging you in on it.
My integrator might say,
And I promise. So this is what people don't know about me, but that my friends know about me. I would never put you in a position that I didn't think was amazing and important and valuable. Meaning, I would never say, "Hey, we're going to do this," if I didn't think it would be a great experience for you and a great experience for me and your community.
We have to get a training session in sometime too. The next time we're in Texas or perfect. All right. Well, it's March 30th. And then the next day she's getting knee surgery. We found a phenomenal surgeon, an expert in Mexico City, and Dr. Michelle Ruiz, and she's getting her knee completely reconstructed. Her shoulder, Patrick Denard out in Oregon did her shoulder, and I can't believe her range of motion. It's so exciting. And I'll tell you, she is moving like she moved 4 or 5 years ago now, because that chronic pain, and when somebody starts getting a loss of range of motion, and this is what we're passionate about, right, Gabrielle? It's like we have a vision. I think you and I have this shared vision that people can have phenomenal health. They can have phenomenal health, and it's never too late. Look at my mom, 200 pounds, 70 years old, and now she's able to get complete shoulder repair, and 3 months later, press overhead. That's like she's having the recovery of a 20-year-old. This is why we say building muscle and learning how to move well and really take care of your body. It's not about aesthetics. That's the icing on the cake. Mm-hmm. Agency is being able to take care of yourself in a way that allows you to stay independent and live with hope. Every day she gets up and she says, I don't know what's going to happen next. I feel excited. And she's turning 80 in like 7 weeks or something like that.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you so much.
Inspiring. I'm so grateful to get to hang out with you. You know, I just adore you and everything that you're doing.
Right back at you. Thank you so much for being on the show. And so, guys, the book, we're going to leave details in the show notes for you. And what is the date of the challenge? When does that start?
The challenge starts February 15th. People can purchase the book on Amazon. They can also go to Dr. Gabrielle Lyon /playbook, drgabriellelyon.com/playbook or something like that. Yes. Yeah.
We'll leave it in the show notes.
We'll find it, but we're doing a bunch of giveaways prior, and it's a lot of fun. We move the needle together.
Love it. Yeah. Okay, guys. Thank you so much, Gabrielle. We'll see you again soon.
Okay. Thank you.